This commentary was recorded before the death of the story's director, Michael Ferguson, who we obviously speak about with great affection, but in the present tense. I'd like to salute Michael for all the hours of entertainment he gave us. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, get a special guest to choose their favourite things about a story, and I have to then guess what those favourite things are.
Hi there, my name is Pip Madeley, and I suppose I'm best known for being a Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, so if you're a fellow Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, then perhaps you might have heard of me. I'm taking time out today from babysitting Marvellous to watch one of my personal favourites. It's the classic 1966 William Hartnell story, The War Machines, which always takes me to a happy time and place. Now, Toby has asked me to come up with 5 of my favourite things, but will he manage to actually guess any of them? Well, stay tuned to find out.
Well, welcome everybody. I've completely torn up my plans and just watched a story that I decided I fancied watching. I wanted to do a bit of black and white. I wanted to do some Hartnell. The next Hartnell on my list, though, was Marco Polo, which is 7 episodes that don't exist, and a story I don't know very well, that I would have had to chew through 2.5 hours worth of telesnap reconstructions. So much as the special guest who has guided me on the journey to Cathay is somebody I was very much looking forward to hearing from, I'm a bit tired, and so I chose a slightly easier, a morsel that's slightly easier to digest, and also one that timing-wise is appropriate, as we will discover. So as special guest Pip, who's a genius on the internet and a very funny man, and I'm really pleased he's contributed to this, he has recorded his favourite things about this story. I'm going to see if I can guess what they are. So, I have the DVD in my machine, and I am going to ask you to press play all, or play episode 1, or whatever you're going to do, in 3, 2, 1. Now, I have a very interesting relationship with this story. I always get a bit cross when season polls and things happen online, and it's season 3, and everybody chooses the War Machines above things like the Massacre and the Mythmakers, which are better stories, and the Gunfighters, which I think are more interesting, takes on the show. But of course, at the time, this was a very interesting take on the show because there was nothing like it. We'd never been to contemporary Earth before. But because I think it's so like what is to come, I sort of think, oh, well, people are only voting for it because it's what they're used to from the Pertwee era or whatever. That's a brilliant opening shot. Director Michael Ferguson, who, having been a floor manager on things like the first Dalek story, becomes one of, I think, the most interesting classic series directors. Now, I think this is subconsciously why I've chosen this story. Dear Jackie Lane there, who played Dodo, has just, the news has just broken. Found out this week that she passed away, actually 2 or 3 weeks ago. Excuse me. And I'm rather sad about that. I've never been a great fan of Dodo. But I met Jackie Lane on a train. Would you believe? I was never going to meet her at a convention. I was never going to meet her doing a DVD because she didn't do them. She was the Greta Garbo of Doctor Who, bless her. And Scotland Yard whipped off into time and space. And I used to get that London train, London to Manchester, a lot. And I always used to go for whatever they're called, Coach E, because Coach E was the unreserved one, and I always wanted to get a table so I could plug in and do a bit of work on my laptop, whatever. And I saw this person getting on Coach E, and I was like, oh, and struggling with a big bag, and she was small and struggling with a big bag. I was like, now she's going to be in the door, and I'm going to wait behind her. Then everyone's going to fill up from the other end, and my journey's going to be. And I was thinking this as I was approaching, and she was still quite far away, and I thought, I think that's Jackie Lane. And I know I'm probably prone to hallucinating Doctor Who actors wherever I go, but good golly, I was right. So I like the use of the wind machine there. Isn't it great seeing? I love the fact that Dodo and the Doctor seem so close, and there's something fabulous about seeing Hartnell in contemporary London, because this is a novel sight. This is actually seeing Hartnell in contemporary London is as strange as seeing a police box on a quarry planet or whatever. So I know that I think any problems I have with this story are based on my love for season 3 and the fact that this always, as I say, seems to top the polls. And I do think it's perhaps not as necessarily as esoteric and interesting and just slightly odd as the John Wiles era. But also I think I need to get over myself a little bit with it. I'm fully aware of that. And isn't it interesting that Doctor Who can just walk into the post office tower? But that's a great thing as well, isn't it? Makes it a really interesting period piece that he's gone to the, he's gone to the great new edifice in London. John Harvey there as Professor Brett. See, I think my main image of this story is of John Harvey, John Cater, and Alan Curtis as the three human, not villains, but the three humans who've been taken over, standing in a room telling each other the plot, but standing, because Michael Ferguson is a great director, his placement of their bodies, his placement of them is always quite interesting and good to look at. But to me, that it's not as, that doesn't have the sly intellectual wit of Donald Cotton. It doesn't have the strange ambition of the Ark. What other stories was I mentioned? Oh, it doesn't have the sort of brilliant doom-laden thing that John Luca Rotti gives to the Massacre, which is a lovely, has great period stuff as well. I love the historicals anyway. But in its own right, this has many glorious things. Hartnell in his hat in contemporary London, and this has its own sort of strangenesses. Like, I always thought he was called Wotan, but they've decided to call him Votan. But yeah, this is the first time that the Doctor does what Doctor does all the time now, which is visit contemporary Earth. So what a different series it was for those first 3 years. And Hartnell, nearing the end of his reign, is by no means at the end of his tether, is he? And look how gloriously, massive this computer is. Whereas, of course, and that's the wonderful thing about the future as postulated in the past, is that they thought, well, to be impressive, you have to be big. Whereas, of course, what we've discovered about technology is actually the better something is, the smaller it is, the more technology it can fit into a compact space. So Jackie Lane on a train. I really need to do other Doctor Who actors in methods of transport that rhyme with them. John Abineri on a ferry. And she's treated very, very badly, I think. As we will discover, she disappears halfway through episode 2. I think that's pretty mean. Innes Lloyd, a fine producer, and it seems a very old school gentleman. I've seen him interviewed a couple of times, and Alan Bennett, whose producer he became, spoke very highly of him, of having, proper old world BBC manners. Well, he comes in and he fires Peter Purvis and Jackie Lane. Oh, good, slightly takey overacting there, Jackie. Good for you. And hello, Annika Wills. We will be talking about her a lot, I'm sure. Although, of course, this is This is her only complete story in existence. Good Lord, isn't that awful? So I waited till I texted a couple of mates and said, I'm on a plane. I'm on a train with Jackie Lane. I could have been on a plane as well. That's a good ceiling shot. Look at these funky young things. Yeah, there's the guy who has a fight with Ben is called Flash. Ewan Proctor is the actor, I think, and I think that's about the only thing he's got on his TV CV. But if you're going to have a part on your TV CV, Flash in Doctor Who is pretty cool. Flash in the Inferno, I like it. And here's Sandra Bryant as Kitty, who we couldn't find for ages and ages and ages, but she has turned up recently and done a couple of signings. She's very 60s, isn't she? I think she had a couple of... She have a couple of records, Sandra Bryant. And she, like John Harvey as Professor Brett, was hired for the Macra Terror. But we'll talk about... I've got the Macra Terror on the list. We'll talk about Sandra Bryant's contribution or not to the Macra Terror when we get to the Macra Terror. I love Ben and Polly. So anyway, we will talk about them because we've got plenty of time with them in this story. We don't have, although this picture was in Doctor Who magazine where she's looking at him. That's yeah. There was a lovely shot of them. My friend said, well, you can't pass up this opportunity. But I thought, I don't want poor old Jackie Lane, who's always been reluctant to talk about Doctor Who, to... that's the photo in Doctor Who magazine. It's when they're facing each other. That's right. To feel like she's stuck on a 2-hour, 8-minute journey with a Doctor Who fan from whom she can't escape. So I waited till we left Stockport, which is the last stop before Manchester. So she knew she'd got a maximum of 15, 20 minutes. And I walked past a couple of times, and I was terrified. I was sweating. I get that sort of nervous smell you get when you're a bit terrified. So I walked up and down, and I kept looking around, and I plucked up the courage, and I stood up, and then I noticed that the person in the seat opposite me, I love Ben having Ben. I mean, I know it's a bit 60s, where the man has to do the masculine fighty thing and on behalf of the lady. I know it's a bit old-fashioned now, but it's a great way to introduce the character. You want to go home, yeah, go away, Flash. I know he's done a signing or two for Phantom. And of course, yes, they start not quite liking each other. I like Michael Craze is so natural. I think he's great. So anyway, I spoke to Jackie Lane, who that's it. I sort of got up, and I noticed the woman opposite me sort of flinch, as if she was going, what is this guy gonna... And I looked straight at her, and it was Tracy Barlow from Coronation Street, and I think she'd seen this sort of nervous guy, and I thought he's plucking up the courage to talk to me. And of course, I walked straight past her, talked to the old lady in the corner, and I said, are you Jackie Lane? And she said, how do you know that? And I said, and I explained to her I was, and that I'd done a few things for Doctor Who, and I tried to reassure her that she could take part in the DVDs, even if she was a bit nervous. We'd make it easy for her. And she said, I haven't been in a television studio for 50 years. And I said, well, we could go to your home, or we could blind her. And I was really gentle, and she was happy to talk about Doctor Who, and she was lovely. And I just got the impression she was happy to talk one-on-one, but she was just a bit shy, and she didn't want to be on camera. And I know she had hearing problems, so she didn't want to do, commentaries with headphones. This is Rick Felgate playing the journalist, who was director Michael Ferguson's brother-in-law, because I think he and there's a connection, because I think was he the brother of Cynthia Felgate, who was the woman behind Play School, who I think was married to. I've listened to my Who's Round with Michael Ferguson. It explains. And Rick is in 3 of Michael's Doctor Who's, because he's Brent in The Seeds of Death, and he's Van Leyden in The Ambassadors of Death. And I think he's a very good actor, who's good in and of course he's playing an American, so he's chewing gum, which is a lovely shorthand. And William Mervyn, the marvellous William Mervyn here, and the wonderful John Cater. I love John Cater, who, when I first saw this, I didn't know as an actor, and then, of course, I spotted him everywhere. I thought, I spotted this guy. Both him and Alan Curtis as Major Green were two guys who played quite prominent parts, so I thought, I don't know these guys. And it's because I'd never seen the cast list written down, so I'd probably not been looking for them, because then I, of course, discovered that they had huge careers and CVs, and were still, actually, when this came out on DVD, were still very much around. And this led to me, here's lovely Alan Curtis as Major Green. Another gentleman of the old school, blazer-wearing, cricket-loving, lovely Alan Curtis, who, like Jackie Lane, died recently. Alan died at the beginning of the year. He phoned me just before New Year's Eve and said, I think I've probably got till September. I'd love it if you could come and sort out my scrapbooks and stuff. And, of course, we couldn't, because we were all locked down with COVID, and he didn't have till September. He only lived another couple of months, month and a half. But I had a right old chat to him before he went. I'd visited him at home. He had a stroke 20 years previously, but soldiered on, taught himself to write again with his other hand, still maintained his old-fashioned manners. And I think sometimes we have to be careful, because when we talk of old-fashioned, you go, was he very sort of reactionary and right-wing? No, he was, as he said, are you like me, a gentleman of the left? So although he was quite establishment, he was also obviously slightly iconic, a bit of an iconoclast within his own social circle. And he was very charming, but again, quite shy. I had to go to his house twice to interview him. And in fact, he'd have backed out the second time had he been able to find my phone number, because he didn't trust his voice. But we did it in the end. And he did have loads of scrapbooks. And he worked with David Whittaker when they were both actors, and he told me some really interesting stuff about David Whittaker. I'm not talking much about the War Machines, am I? I'm talking about my encounters with these people, but the people are my conduit to Doctor Who. This is a great story. I'm loving the nightclub. It all seems so incongruous for Doctor Who of this period. Jackie Lane's doing a great job suggesting that all is not quite right with Dodo. It's like she's got a slight headache and she's just slightly detached. I'm so sad that she's going to be gone next week. As I say, yeah, because Innes Lloyd, yes, he comes in and gets rid of Stephen and Dodo, but then replaces them with these bright young things. But then hairy-legged Highlander Fraser Hines comes in and he goes, actually, I don't need Ben and Polly much either. Get rid of them. Essentially in episode 2 of The Faceless Ones. I know they come back for episode 6, but that's only on film at the end. And, not even let's get you through to the rest of your story. And yes, and I think this is a story that, interestingly, because it's set in the modern day, John Harvey reminds me slightly of. Well, there's a bit he does. When we get to it, but he's not hiding the fact that he is under the control of Votan. But yes, so this story is actually quite important because, well, for me, because Cater and Curtis were still with us when they did the DVD, and I was emailing somebody from the DVD range, and they were talking to me about the commentaries, and I said, well, come on, the War Machines, you've got John Cater, you've got Alan Curtis, and you've only got Michael Ferguson and Annika Wills for the whole 4 episodes, and there's no making of either, because it was one of those budget range ones, so there's no proper documentary. And those guys, Cater's gone now, so it's Frank Jarvis, John Rolfe, and loads of cast members who were alive at the time. And the word was, they didn't ask some of the cast because they assumed they were dead, sort of thing. And you go, well, don't assume. They're in spotlight. It's not even like that to look very hard. So, but because I thought I was just sort of chatting to another Doctor Who fan rather than, of course, somebody close to the production of the DVDs, I was perhaps a bit more forceful than I might have been, and that was where the conversation started. Of, well, do you think you could be interested in doing one of the commentaries? And I went, absolutely. I mean, even if it's just telling you who's not dead. I like the way that's shot. It's very clever. There's something about the fact that it starts with Major Green dragging his feet and that the camera is slightly high. And I love the little turntable-y effect. The pottery wheel effect that comes back and is used a lot. That kind of thing in the war games. I understand. Yes. Oh, well done, Alan. I think that might be Alan's own tie. I don't know why I think that, but I think it is. If it's now, I don't know about ties, but if it's a cricket tie or an MCC tie, it's definitely his. But for some reason, I think that's his tie. I'm loving this nightclubby stuff. And when I did Evil of the Daleks, and Simon Guerrier talked about, the Doctor and Jamie in episode 1 of that being, it's the only episode with the second Doctor and Jamie spend the whole of it in 60s London, and this is our first episode. So this must have been like the X-Files, when it was actually on, sort of contemporary and conspiracy, and the Doctor consorting with people at the very top, but actually it's the very top that has been inveigled by the alien intelligence, or computer intelligence. Top work to the extras, who are after doing a lot of dancing in the background, which is never great fun. And aren't they all cool and young in 60s? And they're probably all either ancient or dead now. I love John Cater. He's a terrific actor, and he was married to Wendy Gifford, who's Miss Garrett, the beautiful Wendy Gifford, who was Miss Garrett in The Ice Warriors and was in The Power Game and so much else. But as I say, I didn't know Cater when I first saw this, and then I saw his name in a listings magazine we had at home. I don't know why we'd got an American listings magazine for being in Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, which he's in, and then he just turned up in all sorts of telly playing. He's in The Woman in Black. He was in a thing called Shalom Shalom. And he was top billed in that, I think. It pops up in Black Eyes as well, I think. That set wasn't the sturdiest. But what I like about this is that Crimpton and Cater, who I think is probably the best actor in this. I love William Mervyn, and he's perfectly cast a type, and absolutely spot on. But I think just in terms of as a general purpose, all round and versatile character actor, I think Cater's the pick of the bunch, and so I like the fact that it's his character that gets a bit of resistance. I mean, he becomes a zombie like the other two and spends the rest of the time shouting the plot in a room, as the three of them do. But at least he gets to show that he's got some sort of pluck and some sort of mental resistance to the will of Wotan. But yeah, and he's doing a good job of suggesting sort of. Oh, and I like this because they use this music in the moon. Is it music? This sound effect, be-doo, 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 in the moon base as well, and it's a really lovely 60s piece of thing. And on the moon, it suggests the moon to me in the moon base, and it suggests here, sort of burrowing into the human brain. I love the way he takes his glasses off, and I love the way he does this. Cater does a brilliant job at resisting, but not for long. And oh yes, he's not unlike Donald Pleasance, is he? I wonder if he lost out to Donald Pleasance for a lot of work, but he's a lovely actor and kept going. I've got a feeling his last role was in the first episode of Bone Kickers, which is probably not the best way to go, but there we go. But yes, a shame we missed. So if you interested, but because the DVD does have shortcomings, but I actually, as a student, I bought the VHS of this because it was for that they started to reconstruct the various missing bits. So I'd only ever seen bits with the various edits intact, and so because even though I didn't have any money because I was a student, this was the VHS of this was one where extra work had been put in to make it as complete as possible, and it had got the film trims at the end, or the film sequences that they had left. So I spent, I don't know, was I a student? I may have left and been on the dole, so spent part of my gyro on it. But whatever it was, I went to Forbidden Planet and I bought it, and I wasn't in a position to be buying Doctor Who videos, especially when I had, my own sort of bootleg VHSs of most things. Yes, I'm going to explain the plot to you in a sci-fi way, especially as I have been taken over. That's more like my when we get to the arc, my impression of the Commander will sound fairly similar to that. So it looks like that Dodo, for her last story, is going to get a huge amount to do, because Jackie Lane sort of gets the cliffhanger. Except, of course, it is overshadowed by the fact that it becomes an infamous moment in the history of Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is required. Bring him here. The choice to make Votan Visper is an odd one. It's not how you expect a computer voice to be. So I remember finding that quite surprising. I love what they do with all the graphics. So we have the Wotan symbol for the credits to go over. We have the novel way of doing the credits at the beginning in that sort of tick tape. And I think every single episode introduction is different. And Wotan gets an "and" credit. Don't you just love that? I love "and" credits in movies anyway. It's it's a way of drawing attention to an actor who's perhaps not the star, so can't get star billing, but deserves just a slight little bit of extra note. But of course, Votan is not real. He's not a member of Equity, and I'll pause there. And Votan. Now, I know I'm going to choose Votan's "and" credit as one of my favourite things. I'm quite tempted to choose the fact that it has that that contentious thing of saying Doctor Who is required, because it gives us something to debate. And there's, you can wriggle out of it. You can say, for whatever, Votan did not know what Doctor Who was called, the Doctor is called, so just substituted Who for as an indication that that was information yet to be understood. Although Votan does know what TARDIS stands for, but that allows us to have, as fans, lots of sort of interesting conjecture and invent theories, and that's part of the fun of being a fan. And it's quite a nice little thing. And I remember in Doctor Who: A Celebration, which I got for Christmas, my mum flicking through that and saying, to the whole family, is because this was an interesting. She said, "Oh, well, apparently he's never been called Doctor Who on screen, although it actually is. He actually is in one episode." So you go, so. He's like, he's never. I think they use the example. Holmes never said "Elementary, my dear Watson." Kirk never said "Beam me up, Scotty," and Doctor Who has never been called Doctor Who, except he has been called Doctor Who. But that was admitted to be a mistake by the production team. Well, yeah, mistakes by the production team aren't real in universe. When Dodo leaves, Professor Brett doesn't go, "I think Votan has just made a mistake caused by the production team." In the in-universe of Doctor Who, he's called Doctor Who at the end of this episode, and as we shall discover loads of times next week. But what struck me watching that was seeing Hartnell in 60s London and the very 60s-ness of that, the Inferno nightclub, and how incongruous it was having Hartnell in that situation, and how fresh and modern that seems, and must have seemed to an audience that had just watched, the Massacre, the Celestial Toymaker, the Savages, all strange and interesting and very different stories. But historicals were more commonplace then than stories set in the present day. because Doctor Who hadn't been able to get back to the present day initially, because that would have scuppered the the nature of Ian and Barbara being unwilling fellow travellers. So I'm going to choose Anne Votan, but I might not make that my thing for the whole story, because I don't know if that's going to be the first thing Pip will choose. And of course I've got to try and think of what he will choose, and I'm probably the only person that will choose the way something's done in the credits. The Doctor Who is required, he might choose. But I'm going to go with my gut feeling, which was what struck me about that, which is William Hartnell's Doctor Who in his hat in 20th century London. And for the audience, here, now, today. Because 60s Doctor Who is weird, and that's why it works so well. Everywhere that the TARDIS goes is strange, and the soundtrack is very strange, and it's a strange show. And actually, when it comes back to Earth and our time for the first time, it's still strange, because actually it's strange seeing our hero thrust into that world, which I think is plays really interestingly as a dynamic. And there's all sorts of other great stuff there. I mean, I think Jackie Lane did well, and it's nice to see her. But I know that that's thrust into sharp focus by the news this week. And Michael Ferguson is an excellent director. Even Wotan's W. I love Wotan's W. No, I am going to choose, and I think it's partially because when we did Evil of the Daleks and Simon Guerrier chose Jamie and the Doctor being in the 60s, and I kicked myself for not even commenting on that in my commentary, I think. Anyway, what's Pip chosen for episode 1?
Right, thing number 1.
Ah, he's done the music. I love him for that. I love that. Thanks, Pip.
This first one, it's the fact that Wotan, or is it Votan? Votan? I'm saying Wotan. Wotan has got his own theme tune. You know the tune he plays when it takes over Professor Brett? It goes like da 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 da.
Yeah, it's a good piece of music that does sound a bit like a sort of ticker tape. I love it.
There's no original incidental music for the story, so it was all taken from stock, and it's mostly just computer sound. So I always thought watching this that it was a joke that Wotan was so self-aware and postmodern that it basically came up with its own incidental music when taking people over. And it even says Doctor Who, and he's even got a laugh at the end. He goes, so I think that's absolutely brilliant. And it even gets an on-screen credit. Anyway, that's it. Theme tune, brilliant.
I can see Pip isn't going to be entirely serious about. I'm going to agonise, and he's going to choose something left field and funny, which is fine, because what this is all about is I know my guests only appear at the beginning and at the end, but they hopefully dictate the style and the atmosphere and the approach to how we look at their choice of story. It's been my choice this week because I've got loads of these to choose from, because people have been very kind. This wasn't even on my list of stories I was going to release in the next 10-15 releases, but I've brought it forward because the War Machines was required because of Jackie Lane, and because I didn't want to do 7 episodes of Marco Polo. Sorry, Marco Polo, I love you, but I'm a 47-year-old man in the 21st century, and I need to take a run-up, I think. So I don't get a point for that, even though Pip touched upon some of the things that I talked about. And I think probably ruled out choosing Wotan's credit because he referred to it but didn't choose it as a brilliant thing. Let's see, eh? But yeah, I thought that was good fun, and it wasn't hard to choose something. I could have chosen John Cater as well. There's loads and loads of things about it. So, right, well, that's the end of episode 1. Let's see. I didn't notice Wotan's laugh, though, so I'm going to listen out for that next week. I hadn't picked up on that, but I do find a lot of Wotan's sort of noises quite difficult to discern. I mean, before he says Doctor Who is required, it sounds like he's got indigestion. And I remember thinking, is he talking? Oh no, he's talking now. But there we go. I'm referring to him like he's an individual, so it must be working somehow. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Come back for episode 2, which is the final episode for Jackie Lane. And if any of you get any mysterious phone calls between now and then, and you hear that regurgitated ticker tape music bang, don't answer it. Okay. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Pip Madeley, who can be found on Twitter @PipMadeley, and I urge you to do so. His delightful nonsense is often a highlight of the day. These podcasts would not be possible without the help of patrons, who include Jason Gorman, Alex Kafajoglu, Chris Phone, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Barry Platt, Darren Mackay, Joe Llewellyn, Ian Key, Siobhan Galichon, Chris Dunford-Kelk, John Deere, Rob Dawson, Peter Crocker, Paul Crook, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Mark Keating, Robert Davis, and Scott Pride. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates. If you'd like to join that list of patrons, you can do so at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. There are several tiers, but it's fairly egalitarian. Can you be fairly egalitarian? But generally you get access to advanced material, exclusive material. Everyone gets that. Then as you ascend higher up the ladder, you might get a badge or a trinket or two. But as I say, it's pretty much all accessible from £3 a month. And actually, if you pay yearly, you get a 10% discount on top of that. Of course, I know in these financial times not everyone is able to contribute or to sign up regularly, so Ko-fi is there for that. Ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, where you can do a one-off payment that is still gratefully received. And I also know that sometimes all you can do is listen, and that's fine. I'm very grateful to you for doing so, but maybe you could pop to your podcast outlet and give this a 5-star rating and perhaps a couple of nice lines in review form, because that really helps to keep my algorithms shipshape, and they're looking a bit green around the gills just at the moment. So yeah, get them ready for embarkation. Thanks very much. The Society for Mixed Metaphors would like to apologise for the last speech from Toby Haydock, as it was full of them. My comedy night in Manchester has started again. Go to Excess Malarkey in Manchester every Tuesday night. Full lineup of live comedy on your doorstep if you're in Manchester. It will still continue to have an online show on the first Sunday of every month from August on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey.